Traps have been a staple of Dungeons & Dragons since the early days and are now basically grandfathered into the system like the 6 stats. Hey friend in the TTRPG hobby, my name is GM Jim Heskett and I'm going to talk at you today about traps. And to be completely honest with you, I don't love them. In general, they seem either too simple or too hard. True story, I have deliberately sprung traps in D&D as a player before, just so we could move on to get past it to the next thing. As a DM, I don't like fiddling with them. But recently, I came up with an idea of how to quickly and easily scale traps so they require very little forethought. I will tell you my secret formula a little later on in this video. First, I want to dissect a few pieces of advice on building traps. This advice is also generally applicable to puzzles, but I'm not talking about puzzles in D&D because I don't like them at all, can't stand them. Anyway, let's look at this comprehensive post on Reddit from more than a decade ago. I'm not going to cover every part of this, but here are what I think are the most important bits. We can easily make a cheat sheet on a 3x5 index card based on all this. The Reddit post lists 5 steps to building a trap. First, decide if your trap is magical or mechanical. I think it's smart to include a mixture as long as the environment supports a mix. More on that in a second. And you definitely want mundane traps if you have a rogue in the party, but magical traps also give your Arcana proficient PCs a chance to get involved. You don't want the rogue to have all the fun, right? In a separate article called Lazy Traps, Sly Flourish has some complimentary advice to this. He says use traps that make sense. So when deciding between magical and mundane, he says, if the PCs are battling a bunch of goblins, they probably shouldn't find a lot of arcane traps. Likewise, a powerful wizard isn't going to dig out pit traps full of sharpened sticks when he can just put arcane flame traps along the walls. So this is a relatively simple choice based on the environment. Just apply common sense. And remember, you can always use magic as an excuse if something creates a logic hole. So when your player gets clever and says, wait a second, how did that wizard manage to transport giant steel beams through all these cramped tunnels? If you can't think of a legit reason, the fallback answer is always magic. Next, we decide how the trap is triggered. The Reddit post lists these as options: touch, proximity trigger, sound, sight, location, and timed. Timed is probably my favorite, and I've definitely done this to my players before. You enter a room, the door slams shut behind you, and now you hear a ticking sound coming from somewhere you can't see. Roll initiative. I think to keep things moving fast, since this is a video about improvising traps, we should usually choose proximity trigger or touch. And if you're going to use proximity trigger, give the players some type of warning, like, as you approach the device, it begins to hum louder and louder, but when you take a step back, the hum fades. Don't pull a gotcha and just set off the trap when someone comes a little closer for a better look. Gotchas make players feel frustrated. Connecting clues to the answer makes players feel smart. Traps are meant to be dangerous, not deceitful. Every trap should have some sort of built-in way for you to detect and either disarm it or avoid it. Because if triggering the trap is unavoidable, then you're just saying rocks fall, and that's no fun. Here's a good place to reward PCs with high passive perception or high passive investigation. Give those players extra clues first if the trap is more challenging to the group than you expected. And real quick, since I have you, could I get a like and subscribe below? It only takes a second and it helps us both out. Make sure to click all next to notifications and click the join button to get exclusive perks when you join my channel. Next, the Reddit post says to determine the bypass mechanism, which I think you should skip. It doesn't matter because we're improvising and we need to make a trap fast. Basically, it doesn't matter what the bypass mechanism is as long as the trap has one. It makes sense that a trap's designer would include some secret way to safely disarm a trap. Fourth step in the plan is to determine the type of damage the trap causes, and this is the fun part. This choice will be heavily influenced by your previous choices. If it's a mundane trap, it's not going to summon a monster. If it's a magical trap, it's probably not going to trigger crossbow bolts. Use common sense and have fun. If you're low on ideas, just copy your favorites from the Reddit post onto your index card as inspiration. The fifth step of this Reddit post's plan is to determine the damage in DCs, and this is where I diverge from the advice presented here. I have a different and much more simple way to calculate damage, which I'll get to in just a second. But first, let's talk about the advice in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Here it advises dividing traps into either simple or complex, which I don't like. I don't see how this is better than mundane or magical. The only thing I like about the concept of, quote, complex traps is that you might sometimes include a trap that has more than one locking mechanism. Like, the trap is not disarmed until all 3 or 4 switches have been located. This could be a fun idea if you have, say, a trap that needs to be disarmed during combat or during some other ticking clock encounter. Then it advises choosing level and threat, trigger, effect, and countermeasures. This is more or less the same series of steps as from the Reddit post. But then the thing really breaks down for me when we get to the damage by severity level table. The damage listed here is about the same as the numbers on the table in the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. The DMG lists DC ranges based on PC level and trap severity, and you should definitely steal and use these. Since we're trying to make traps quickly, we don't want to put a lot of time and effort into setting the DCs. This range works perfectly, and we can scribble it on our index card for easy reference. Okay, now I'm finally going to talk about how I do damage for traps. Thank you for your patience. See, I had to make sure you watched all the way through the video because watch time is a very important metric on YouTube. Anyway, let's get into it. The problem I have with the damage by severity tables in Xanathar's in the DMG is that it gives you a range by tier, levels 1 to 4, 5 to 10, 11 to 16, and 17 to 20. I think this is a gross oversimplification, especially for tier 1 and tier 2 play. Let's look at the nuisance damage for tier 1. 1d10 damage at level 4 is indeed a nuisance for basically every class. 1d10 damage at level 1 is potentially lethal for a wizard or sorcerer though. And imagine you're a level 1 barbarian with 14 hit points. If you roll a 9 on the 1d10 damage, that's more than half the barb's hit points, which feels like more than a nuisance to me. So how do you combat the intense swinginess of this? Here is my simple, unbeatable formula for calculating damage for traps. Make the damage multiplier equal to the hit dice of the party. Then choose a d4 or d6 for minor trap, d6 or d8 for medium trap, and a d10 or d12 for a lethal trap. So a party of first level PCs would face a nuisance trap that does 1 d4 damage. A party of 5th level PCs faces a nuisance trap that does 5d4 damage. 5th level PCs against a lethal trap is 5d10. A party of 14th level PCs faces a medium trap that does 14d6. That's it. Simple, easy, and you can calculate it in your head with little math and no eyeballing required. Also, you should consider your party makeup when choosing which die type to use. If you have a party with a barb, fighter, ranger, and paladin, then d10 isn't going to be lethal. If you got a lot of squishy magic users, then that d12 trap could legitimately be lethal. And the best part is you can decide in the moment. Did the party have a long rest before triggering your nuisance trap? Since everyone is all healed to full, maybe you bump that d4 trap up to a d6 trap. Or if everyone is low on resources and wounded, maybe you lower that planned d12 trap down to a d8 trap to show them some mercy. It's flexible, adjustable, and gives you much more control over how to implement your devious trap in the moment. That's really all there is to this video because it's supposed to be simple and quick, so let's keep this video simple and quick. Until the next time I see you, I'm GM Jim, and this has been how to make your traps quick and easy. Have a good one.